Welcome back, fight fans, to Season 2, Episode 5 of The Darker Side of Boxing. And this episode is all about one of the most controversial, flamboyant, colourful characters that has graced the squared circle and has caused many controversies outside of the ring, of course. We're talking today about Mitch Blood Green, one of the most controversial guys that I think we've ever covered. And probably one that we will have an absolute blast covering because there are so many tales of Mitch Blood Green that we've put them all together for this particular story to bring them all to you. I'm really excited and I'm already sort of feeling myself getting ready to have a good giggle at this one because I feel like Mitch Blood Green is a guy that he's probably most famously known for having the fight outside Dapper Dan's with Mike Tyson during the 1980s. Mike Tyson spoke about it on his podcast. It's been spoken about many times before. We're going to get a real good reflective account in this episode about that incident and many, many more incidents. But more importantly, we're going to get to know a lot about his origins as well. And I think that's quite important for Mitch Blood Green, is to know what his origins are. So, Johnston, I'm going to hand the mic over to you here because I know this is probably one of your most favourite episodes that you've been waiting for such a long time. And you've always said to me, I can't wait to do Mitch Green because we're going to have such a blast.
Oh, Mitch Blood Green is one of the most colourful characters, as you've just mentioned, Sean, we've ever done an episode on. One of my favourite personalities, period. If you don't know about Mitch Green, then you're in for just an absolute treat tonight, or whenever you're listening, in the morning, whenever it is. Set yourself an hour and a half, 2 hours, because and no interruptions, because this is a great one. Look, this guy is a cross between, for me, he's a cross between like Randy Watson, the lead singer of Sexual Chocolate in Coming to America, and Dave Chappelle's version of Rick James in the Chappelle show of I'm rich, bitch. If you could picture them two together, you could put them together and mold them together, you will get Mitch Blood Green. We have everything from gang warfare, street fights, drugs, robbery, assault, stints in prison, prostitutes, shooting, stabbings, extortion, and of course Mike Tyson, Don King, and even John Gotti. We've got it all tonight, baby.
Well, I'm looking forward to this one, and I think, Johnson, you've rightly pointed out that there are many elements of Mitch Blood Green's life that are going to be discussed during the course of this episode. There are going to be some infamous moments, so if you're not really particularly interested in the grisly detail, the racial tendencies that are in this episode, there's obviously derogatory moments in this episode, so if any of that offends you, then this is the moment to switch off from the episode. But if it doesn't, and you're happy to listen to an absolute great tale of one of the most flamboyant characters inside and outside of the ring, this is the episode to listen to. And it all begins for Mitch Green when he was born. Not as Mitch Green, but actually Mitchell Green. And he was born on January the 13th, 1957, in Augusta, Georgia, but moved to New York City when he was a child. Because as revealed by Mitch while living in Georgia, he said his father was actually shot at point blank range. And what we understand is that his father was involved in a Western-like shootout with another man, and they were both shot dead as a result. Rumour also has it that both funerals of the men were held on the same day at the same funeral parlour. Now, Mitch himself does contradict in various articles about where in New York he was actually brought up, but the likelihood is that he was raised in the South Bronx in the Soundview projects, a neighbourhood on the Classen Point Peninsula on the southern section of the borough of the Bronx in New York. He also mentions that his patch was across the Harlem River in Upper Manhattan. Those surroundings, well, they were no different from the Bronx. The Soundview projects fell into rapid decay in the 1970s when Mitch was growing up as a teenager due to white flight, growing poverty rates, and a citywide tax crisis. Both South Bronx and Harlem were riddled with crime, and many gangs would be involved in turf wars. If you think of the film from the 1970s, The Warriors, imagine that film. And now if you've not seen it, please do go and watch it. It's a great film. But if you've already watched that film, please just visualise that film now in your mind. That is exactly what the 1970s in these areas of New York were like. And Mitch even used this comparison when he told Tom Hannaran of the Daily News from New York on March the 9th, 1980, and he said, "Oh, they were all bad places, especially uptown, where I was a member of the Black Spades. We had hundreds and hundreds of members, and it was the basis of the Black Warriors gang that featured in the movie Warriors.
Well, the Black Spades actually originated in 1968 from the Sandview projects and quickly spread to other nearby housing projects in the area and obviously throughout the Bronx. They're also one of the participants in the Hoe Avenue peace meeting. Once again, that was the inspiration for when Cyrus gave us one of the greatest moments in Walter Hill's 1979 thriller, The Warriors, when he cried, "Can you dig it?" But that was just for the movies and the screens. This was actual real life for Mitch Green, and he explains what it was like when he told the Daily News from New York on March 9, 1980, "Hey man, I always did a lot of fighting in the street. I like to fight. I'm dedicated to it. That's why my name is Mitch Blood Green, you know? If I didn't make them bleed, I wasn't satisfied. If I didn't scratch them or bloody their nose, I wasn't satisfied. Mitch Blood Green. I must have got the name when I was 14 or 15 and it stuck." Well, Mitch actually stood at 6 foot or over 6 foot at this young age and eventually rose to 6'5". He weighed over 200 pounds, 210. His size obviously made him a target and meant that he quickly rose through the ranks and became one of the leaders of the Black Spades. And Mitch declared, "I used to be one of two guys who would take on any other two guys from any other gang. That was safer than having a whole gang rumble. And it taught me a lot how to survive in a serious fight." While hanging with gang members, Mitch recalls actually being shot with a .22 Magnum. He said, "I was shot twice when I was 17, but it had to have been the will of God that I wasn't hurt."
Wow, that's a crazy start to him, really, isn't it? You know, growing up in such poverty in such a difficult area of the world in a difficult period of time, and quite easily most people got sucked into gangs, and that was the only way to live their lives. Now, going back to Tom Hannaran of the Daily News from New York, he printed, "The first time Green was shot, the bullet passed through his right wrist, but the slug missed arteries, bones and nerves, and Green was fighting again a short few weeks later. The second time he sustained a graze wound when a slug slashed the right side of his head and went on its way, sparing Green but leaving a short puffy scar." Now Mitch's mom, who worked her socks off to try and provide for her son, but was unable to protect him from the effects of the dangerous environment that he lived in, she said he always liked to fight, as a small boy, as a big boy and as a man. For some reason he just likes it. Like his nickname Blood, he likes it. I don't. He didn't really change until he became a boxer. This way, he could let out some of his frustration and anger. I don't know, he just had a mean streak. That mean streak got Mitch Green into many fights, but it also got him plenty of attention from the law. He was arrested many times while in his teens for misdemeanors, but there was a more serious charge in 1974 when he was arrested for assault. And Mitch explained his version of events and he said, "It was a gang fight. Seems like I've been involved in fights all my life. It's all I can do." It was after this arrest that his parole officer asked him what he wanted to do in life, and Mitch told Dick Young of the Daily News in New York, "I can do it all. What do you do best?" "Fighting," he said. "Well then, try it."
And with that advice, Mitch Green walked into the United Boxing Association's gym in New York City one day and looked to turn his life around. And he was greeted by a guy called Johnny Bowman, who would go on to guide Mitch Green to 4 New York Golden Glove heavyweight titles. Now, Bowman's motto was no nonsense. My rules is their rules. That goes for him, as in Mitch Green. That goes for any of them. That's why he's wearing those around his neck. At the time of that interview with Dick Young, Mitch had secured 2 gold boxing glove chains in 1976 and in 1977. And the long-term plan was to make the 1980 Olympic Games in Moscow. Mitch told Dick Young, "I'd like to fight that Cuban guy." That Cuban guy being the current Olympic champion, Theo Stevenson. Please check out our career profiles on that great Cuban heavyweight if you haven't. And Mitch continued, "The best way to beat him is the way Sugar Ray Leonard and Howie Davis won the Olympics. Just keep moving and boxing and throwing a lot of punches. That's the way I like it. Keep throwing punches. That's why I like Roberto Duran. He throws punches in the 12th, 15th round the same way he does in the first round. too many heavyweights throw one punch at a time. And Mitch, you absolutely bang on, mate. Mitch did go on to say that there was only one heavyweight around at the time that could actually beat him, and that was Muhammad Ali. He was still obviously fighting in 1977, albeit on the decline. He was the only man that can beat him. And Mitch missed out actually on the 1978 Golden Gloves title after he sustained a cut preventing him from winning his third on the spin. However, he continued to impress in the amateurs and won 2 more Golden Gloves titles, as we've already said, in 1979 and again in 1980. That's 4 Golden Gloves heavyweight titles in 5 years. Impressive stuff.
Now, Mitch Green had a highly decorated amateur career, winning the Intercity Golden Gloves in 1977 and 1979. He fought in the US National Championships in 1977 and lost in the semi-finals to Greg Page by decision before going on to represent his country against the USSR in duels in 1977 and 1978, winning one and losing one. He defeated Tony Tubbs in the 1978 final of the National Sports Festival and James Smith in the AAU Intercity semi-finals that same year. He eventually won the AAU Intercity finals in 1980, defeating Mike Gans by a first-round knockout. With the Moscow Olympics just round the corner, Mitch travelled to Tennessee, where he sparred with the WBA World Heavyweight Champion John Tate, and then to Washington, where he trained with Sugar Ray Leonard's handler Dave Jacobs. On June 16, 1980, Mitch was matched against Marvis Fraser, son of Joe Fraser, at the Olympic trials in Atlanta, Georgia, but lost by a unanimous decision 5-0. The following day, the Philadelphia Daily News printed a report on the fight and quoted Fraser describing his encounter with Mitch Green, and it said, "I hit him with double rights twice and he had to go down. But he didn't. He refused. I couldn't believe it. And I put a couple of left hooks right on the money. It was a war." Even with that defeat, Mitch was considered a prospect for the Olympics, so he quit his job as a security guard to spend full time preparing. "I'm really getting it together," he said. "I'm taking the time out so I can just think about boxing." At this point, Mitch was also eyeing up his 5th Golden Gloves and landing an Olympic place, but he did admit at the time, "I want to go pro right after the gloves." But his Olympic dream was over before it even began. After the US boycott of said Olympics, Mitch said, "I had wanted very much to go to the Olympics, give those Russians a bit of New York, but now I'll just see if I can make a living at it."
Yeah, a lot of fighters obviously missed out on that Moscow Olympics. There was several good fighters around at the time, and obviously the United States always had a good team in the 80s, 70s, 80s. So who knows what they could have got on to achieve? Who knows what Mitch Green could have got on to achieve, and how his life could have been so different. But Mitch Green ended his amateur career with a record of 64 wins, 7 losses, and 51 of those were by knockout. Impressive. He turned professional under Shelley Finkel, who some of us will know, who was the handler of Deontay Wilder. And he actually met Finkel in the 1979 New York Golden Gloves that was obviously held in Madison Square Garden. They all were. I don't think there were any that weren't. Finkel signed him alongside a group of young professionals who would build tomorrow's champions. Among others, the group included Alex Ramos, Tony Ayala, Donald Curry, and Johnny Bumpus. Mitch made his debut on November 25th, 1980, stopping fellow debutant Johnny Pitts in 3 rounds at the Civic Center in Connecticut. After 2 more stoppage wins, Mitch Green hit his first bump in the road when he drew with a guy called Robert Evans at the Great Gorge Playboy Club in New Jersey. Mitch was back in another Playboy building 4 months later, this time in Atlantic City, but back to winning ways. So he got another win there. Good stuff. Instead of keeping active in the ring, though, to progress his career, Mitch Green found himself out of the ring for 10 months. Now, this could have been down to Mitch Green's relationship with Shelley Finkel. They had a bit of a breakdown. Shelley Finkel admitted to the New York Times that Mitch would frequently complain about the progress and profits of his career compared to the others of tomorrow's champions. And Finkel recalled, Mitch would say, "Alex Ramos is making this, I should be making this," and I'd say, "I don't make you the money, the network makes the offer. Then it's my decision to pass or accept." I tried to convince him he should take what was out there and get to the next stage of his career. Otherwise, a fighter's skills dilapidate and he ends up making less money. By staying active, his name is in the newspapers all the time. And to be fair, he's right.
Mitch was never going to be the sort of fighter that gets told what to do. He once told a reporter while chewing on a toothpick, a gimmick he continued with throughout his career, I had managers that didn't like me to do the toothpick, so naturally, I kept on doing it. Whatever the reason for the fallout, Mitch Green left Finkel after a year as a professional and turned to a new manager, Carl King, the son of Don King, who also became his promoter. From April the 9th to October the 2nd, 1982, Mitch Green won 5 fights on the spin, stopping 3, the last being Londale Friesen in a second round knockout. Now, he was less active in 1983, fighting only twice, a unanimous decision against Floyd Cummings on February the 16th, then 5 months later he outpointed James Dixon at the Dunes Hotel in Las Vegas. Mitch didn't appear back in a ring until March the 21st, 1984. Once again he was back in Vegas at the Showboat Hotel and Casino, where he knocked out Linwood Jones in the very first round. Mitch did not surface until the summer, when he took on Young Lewis in July and then Sammy Scoff in August, stopping both in the 6 rounds. Now, his career record stood at 15 wins and 10 knockouts, but he would be inactive once again, this time for the best part of a year. Now, we were unable to establish the exact reason for this hiatus, but we could probably take a good stab in the dark at this and say that he probably spent some time in Rikers Island jail. Now, Mitch's future manager, Charles Farrell, admitted he never went in, as into Rikers Island, for long, but would occasionally do stretches of a month or two, during which time he took the opportunity to lift weight, do exercises, and engage in a running monologue or self-adulation. Mitch's reason for the gap in his career was the way things were going. I lost desire.
Well, whatever the reason, he made a return to boxing of sorts on March 14, 1985. Now, there was a press fight conference between Larry Holmes and David Bay, and it had absolutely nothing, and I mean nothing, to do with Mitch whatsoever, but he decided to gate crash their meet. Dick Young, again, of Ansbury Park Press, printed that Mitch Green began harassing Larry Holmes at the press conference. He kept screaming that Larry Holmes was fighting nothing but bums, and that he, Green, was as good a bum as anyone around. Young continued, he, as in Mitch, lunged to get at the champ and wound up with his fingers clutching for the size 18 neck of Mr. D, who was just standing there protecting the heavyweight champion of the world. Now, Mr. D was a bodyguard called Robert DiGiulio, who stood at 6'4" and weighed 400 pounds. Dick Young recalled in his article that Mr. D opened his mouth and damn near bit off Mitch Green's left thumb. That was then an easy matter for the rest of the Holmes entourage to escort Mitch Green from the scene. Well, Mitch was undeterred that he almost got his thumb bitten off and actually went to the bout the next night. And Dick Young actually reported that he had seen him with another certain promoter, Butch Lewis, at the Riviera Hotel, where the fight was discussing a potential future partnership, which never developed. Now, his self-promoting tactics certainly made an impression with someone in the sport, because on October 8, 1985, the undefeated, at the time, Mitch Green, was finally back in the ring and fighting for the US Boxing Association Heavyweight Championship against the then champion Trevor Berbick, who was 28-4-1 at the Riviera Hotel Casino Superstar Center in Las Vegas. Coincidentally, Berbick had actually defeated David Bay to win that title back in June, and this was his first defense.
I'm still creasing at the fact that he actually nearly had his thumb bitten off, and he decides to still go there the next night, trying to make a name for himself. Straight away, it screams to me, imagine that version of Mitch Green in the social media era. Oh my goodness.
Brilliant.
He'd be like Adrian Broner, wouldn't he? You know, that's the sort of comparison you can
Better.
make.
Yeah.
Every time you see a video of Adrian Broner, it's never nothing to do with his actual boxing career. It's always to do with something outside of the ring, whether it's abusing a member of staff at a fast food restaurant. It's always something with him. Now, after the shenanigans of the Holmes Bay press conference, security must have been on high alert, because once again, a fracas ensued. The Dispatch in Illinois reported that Green apparently took a swing at Berbick following his win over Bay, while Berbick held his infant daughter in his arms. Now, there was bad blood between these two after that meeting, and that was evident throughout their fight. The Dispatch in Illinois wrote, "The two threw several punches at each other for 10 seconds following the 10th round. The referee, Joey Curtis, who had Berbick in a bear hug, took most of the punches." They also reported on the fight details, and it said Berbick landed the heavier and more effective punches throughout the fight, but Green impressed one of the judges with his jabs. Judges Dave Moretti and Dalby Shirley scored the fight 116-112 for Berbick, while the judge Tony Castellano scored it a draw, 114-114. There were no knockdowns in the fight, but Berbick had Green in trouble on 2 occasions after jarring left hooks to the jaw. So Mitch had put up a valiant effort against Trevor Berbick, who would then go on to capture the WBC heavyweight title the following year against Pinkland Thomas. Mitch returned to the ring after that defeat 2 months later before Berbick upset Thomas on January the 17th, 1986. He took a convincing unanimous decision over Purcell Davis, who was 13-2 in Atlanta, after flooring him in the 8th. But what he didn't realise at the time was his next fight would be the biggest of his career, and against the baddest man on the planet.
Well, but before that, Mitch found himself in a spot of bother with the law. On May 13, 1986, a warrant was issued for his arrest on an assault charge, but during a hearing at the Manhattan Criminal Court, basically shows he had listened to enough, and he walked out and didn't return. Sergeant John Venatucci said that a warrant was issued, but it was a C warrant, the lowest warrant priority, and he will not be arrested at the fight. The next fight that the sergeant was talking about was against, of course, you know, if you didn't know, the baddest man on the planet, was at the time was the up-and-coming heavyweight with a record of 20 wins and 19 knockouts, and of course that was Mike Tyson. Now, Mitch almost actually never fought because of a financial dispute. He said that he was guaranteed $50,000, but on the day of the weigh-in, he was told that he's only going to get $30,000. Now that pissed Mitch off, especially when he found out that Mike Tyson was getting $650,000 for the fight. Now he's fuming, and he refuses to fight until he's given more money. The New York State Athletic Commission intervened and told Mitch under no uncertain terms that they would strip him of his boxing license if he refused to back out, because they had a signed agreement. Mitch was adamant that he had never signed anything, and of course the evidence suggested he was actually telling the truth. The contract he had was countersigned by his manager Carl King. Where he may have had a point, the New York State boxing law made it legally binding. Don King then stepped in. He stepped in to try and smooth things over, and he took Mitch off for afternoon chat. And when they returned, Mitch had nice and calm, and he decided he's going to go through with the fight, and it was back on.
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall in the car that day. And
innit?
What would have Don King said to him that would have convinced him to get that fight on? Surely there must have been a promise of some money somewhere, or maybe even Don King could have given him some money. You know, cash in hand job. Yeah. You just never know, do you? I mean, the stories we brought to the attention of our listeners for the Don King 2-part episode we did in season 1, I think that's quite evident that this could have quite easily been something of this nature. Quite easily. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that one, though, because it would have been very interesting to know what he said to calm him down. So, Mitch Green, well, he fought Mike Tyson on May the 20th, 1986 at Madison Square Garden in New York. But once again, it didn't go smoothly. Ring announcer Ed Derrion was quoted as saying, "Kill some more time, Mitch won't come out." Derrion went to Mitch Green's changing rooms and he said he overheard Mitch say, "I want all the money I got coming. I want the whole $30,000 or I won't fight." The message was relayed to Don King by the New York State Athletic Commission chairman Jose Torres, and he was told by Don, "Give him all the money," and Torres replied, "That's not right. What about the manager's share?" King didn't care. He wanted the fight to go ahead. He said, "Give him that too." The commissioner assured Mitch that he would get the whole $30,000 instead of the $20,000 he would have received after the manager's cut, and he made his way to the ring. Although Mitch became only the second fighter to go the distance with Tyson at the time, which he did get great credit for, his display in that fight was actually lackluster. The Herald Journal wrote about this fight, and they wrote, Tyson 3 times knocked out Green's mouthpiece and shook him with short, devastating punches to the head and roundhouse punches to the body. But Green would not go down, and several times fought back with flurries as Tyson left himself open. While there were moments of excitement, the fight before a crowd of 6,529 was marked by a lot of clinching, and in the late rounds there were choruses of boos. Tyson never had Green in any danger except once in the early rounds when he doubled Green up with 2 right hands to the body.
Well, the result, as many of us would know, we know that Mike Tyson didn't lose to Mitch Green, and it was a unanimous decision in favour of Mike Tyson, with 2 judges giving Mitch 1 round and the third giving him 2. Now, after the fight, Mitch spoke of his mood during the fight, saying, no desire, no determination, no nothing. He put that down to that financial dispute that he had with Don King. He said, I can't get motivated because I can't get paid. I'm not no $2 fighter. Give me some money and I'll fight a bear. I'll fight King Kong. As Mitch made his way to the change rooms, he was actually quoted as saying, I'm quitting boxing. And that he would take his case to the commission, demanding that his contract with the Kings now be void. Well, Don King really weren't bothered one little bit. He actually told the press that I'm cutting him loose. I don't need this aggravation. I don't want to be bothered with Mitch Green no more. That man is an accident going somewhere to happen, and I don't want to be around when it does. He's free. Goodbye. By September 18, 1986, Mitch was back to his old tricks outside the ring, and he was arrested for drink driving and resisting arrest after his pink, and I repeat, pink, 1979 Lincoln Continental collided with another car in the Bronx. This is a repeated thing that will happen. He can't drive. Basically, he can't drive for shit. 2 months later, Mitch was scheduled to fight James Bone Crusher Smith on the undercard of Tim Witherspoon against Tony Tubbs for the WBA World Heavyweight title. But Tubbs had to withdraw due to a shoulder injury. Against the will of Witherspoon, Smith was substituted by Don King, but he threatened to pull out of the fight altogether. King told Tubbs, like he does, takes him away, puts his arm around him. He needs to fight, otherwise he's going to hit him with legal action. So he had no choice but to take the fight. So now, Mitch Green ain't got a fight.
Now, James Bonecrusher Smith, of course, was a happy man. Not only was he getting a chance at the World Heavyweight title, but he also received a hefty payday raise from $35,000 to a purse of $230,000. That, of course, as you said, left Mitch Green without a fight and no compensation. So, of course, he was pissed. During the Witherspoon-Smith press conference, Mitch appeared with his mum to make his emotions known. Now, this is something you can actually go and watch on YouTube, but this is what the TSN Sports broadcast. As soon as Mitch Green entered the room, he made a beeline for Don King, shouting the odds. It's not right. You're underdoing me, man. Don't mess with my life. I'm telling you now, you're not going to mess up my life no more, punk. He started to walk away, but came back at Don and wanted to punch him, but there were, of course, way too many bodies in the way. The press then stated that King went on an 82-minute cathartic speech on which we learned everything about the man with the exception of what he had for breakfast on January the 3rd, 1956. He did, of course, mention Mitch Green's interruption and harassment by saying, everybody has attacked me, and many of the press here can be a living testimony to it. They have castrated me. They have burned me on the oils. This is the 2nd or 3rd time he's, as in Mitch Green, threatened my life. It's against the law, especially when you keep making those vicious threats. He's a man who took it upon himself to threaten my life in front of all the illustrious pressing, so your life becomes worthless.
Oh, spare me the violins, Don King, mate. I'm sorry. Jesus Christ. Mitch Green threatened Don King. Ah, oh, mate, I really do wish you give him a wallop, to be fair. But look, it's Don King. We all know the dodginess of Don King. So on August 28, 1987, what happens to Mitch? Well, Mitch is arrested. Again, for driving without a license, caught in possession of a controlled substance, which was PCP, and also known to others as angel dust. He was also resisting arrest. This is a common theme with Mitch. He did like a bit of PCP, a bit of angel dust. Well, the police spokesman said that Green was stopped at 124th Street and 7th Avenue after he was seen driving while watching a small television set on his dashboard of his car. Police said Green's license had been suspended and resuspended 36 times at the time of his arrest. But on September 6th, police arrested him again for drink driving and disorderly conduct. Well, this story goes, as he crossed the Whitestone Bridge in New York, he refused to pay the $2 toll. You know, everyone pays the $2 toll, Mitch. But instead of sort of driving away and going on with his life and probably getting caught up later on, a few days later, he stopped the car, he got out of the car, and then he started harassing the officers at the toll plaza, arguing, why should I have to pay it? Why should I have to pay $2? Well, anyway, at the age of 30, this was his 54th or the 54th time that Mitch had now been stopped for traffic offences alone. God knows how many other offences he's been stopped for. The following month, the United Press International reported on October 29, 1987, that heavyweight boxer Mitch Green was charged with robbery and grand larceny after allegedly taking over a gas station and selling gas to motorists. The 6'5", 30-year-old drove into a gas station on Grand Central Parkway in, again, that 1979 pink Lincoln, and told the attendant on duty to fill his tank. But when the attendant tried to collect the money, Green refused to pay, and he then threatened to beat him up. The man fled from the station. He called police. Green remained at the station, pumping gas and collecting money from other motorists. The attendant returned to the station to see a cab driver paying Green for gas with a $100 bill. Now, the attendant yelled to the cab driver that Green did not work here. He don't work here, basically. And the driver snatched the money back from Green's hand. Green, well, he became enraged and punched the driver in the face just as the police were pulling into the station to investigate.
I said we'd have an absolute ball doing this episode, and that is an absolutely that's a comical story. That is so funny. I can't. You can imagine it, can't you? Visualize the scene. You know, visualize it as a pedestrian. A member of the public just driving into this gas station, and say you knew boxing and you knew Mitch Green. You see this 6'5", muscly black guy at the station pumping the petrol into other people's cars as if he was an attendant, and you're thinking, well, but why is he doing that? What's going on here? And I just can't fathom what was going through his mind. What was it? Was it to get the money? Was he trying to earn money from it? I mean, you just can't believe what a story. What an absolute story.
Brilliant.
And it just gets worse, really, doesn't it? The stories just get even more unbelievable. You actually can't believe these things have happened. So we move forward now, and it was August the 23rd, 1988, at 4 a.m. on 125th Street in Harlem, when word got around that Mike Tyson was in the neighbourhood. Mitch Green apparently gets wind of his arrival, and he decides to drive round to the Dapper Dan's clothes store to confront Mike, who explains in his autobiography why he was in the area at the time. And Mike said, I'd been clubbing one night at the end of August and decided to drop by Dapper Dan's to pick up some clothing they were making for me. It was a white leather jacket that had Don't Believe the Hype, the name of that Public Enemy song, across the back. Now, Dapper Dan's was a shop that would open at any time if a celebrity requested it, no matter what the time was. Mitch Green, well, he gave his account of how he arrived on the scene, and he said, I was in Manhattan on 125th Street, and they told me Tyson was in Dapper Dan's. I went over there to see for myself. The manager of the store recounted that Mitch Green came in aggressively, yelling at Mike Tyson, calling him out, saying, You stole money from me, and Don King stole money from me. Tyson recalled in his words, I rolled in there about 4 a.m. I was feeling good, but my mood was severely altered when this crazy motherfucker Mitch Green came storming into the store, bare-chested. "What the fuck are you doing here, you faggot? You and your motherfucking girlfriend Don King fucked me over in that fight. You're all a bunch of faggots." And he just started ranting. "Look how you talk. You're a faggot." Now, Mitch screamed further obscenities and derogatory comments at Mike Tyson, who warned him that he needed to calm down. But his warning fell on deaf ears. "You didn't beat me. I had no food. That motherfucker Don King gave me no food." Mitch's account was less aggressive when he arrived at that store, and he said, "When I got there, he was there with a lot of his friends, and I approached him and said, 'Mike, what are you doing here? What's up?' I told him when I fought him in '86, I didn't fight him that night because Don King cheated me out of money."
So by Tyson's account, he left the store and he said, I got to the sidewalk, but the crazy punk followed me out there, still ranting and raving. Mitch just wouldn't let it go. And this is what Tyson remembers of that night. This is what he remembers happening next. He got in my face and started clawing at me. I looked down and he had ripped my shirt pocket. That was it. I just walloped him right in the eye. I was drunk and I didn't realise that he was high on angel dust. So he really wasn't going to hit me back. It was like fighting a 10-year-old. I would drag him all up the street and he was screaming. He fought me better in the ring than he did that night. I was throwing punches and crunching this guy and he was weaving and wobbling from side to side like he was going to fall. But he didn't go down. So I did a Bruce Lee Enter the Dragon roundhouse kick on his ass and he went down. My friend Tom, who often drove me around when I was drunk, tried to get me away from him. "Yo, Mike, I think you killed him." He said, "Well, maybe you shouldn't have fucked with me," I said. Again, Mitch gives a different version about a year later. And this would not be the first time that Mitch spoke about this incident, by the way. You'll get used to Mitch speaking about this throughout this whole episode. And this is Mitch's version. Tyson said that he beat me in 1986 and we could go again. And I said, "Do what?" We walked outside. He said, "We can do this now to make up for that fight we had back then." I said, "What?" At that moment, he started to turn his rings like brass knucks. He sucker punched me. I tried to get at him, but his friends held me back. He never knocked me down. He shook his head like a little sissy and ran. The heavyweight champion of the world ran away.
Oh, you just can't imagine it, can you? I mean, how many times have we heard this story? How many times? It's just great, and it continues. There's more descriptions here. There's more descriptions from Mike Tyson now. He describes what happens next when he went to his car after knocking Mitch down, and he said, "As we turned to go to the car, the Night of the Living Dead zombie pops back up like Jason from Friday the fucking 13th and kicks me in my balls, and he says, 'Fuck you, faggot.' That was not good. So I jumped on his neck and started punching him to the ground, where I proceeded to smash his head into the pavement until he was out cold." Tyson admitted to being exhausted after beating down a crazed and high off PCP Mitch Green, so got into his $350,000 Rolls Royce and asked the driver, his friend Tom, to get the fuck out of there. But he refused. "No way, that crazy cat, he's under the wheel," Tom said. I looked out of my window and up popped Mitch again. He was screaming and yelling and banging on the window. Then he just ripped my side view mirror right off. That's 50 grand right there. Now I was mad as a motherfucker. I pulled open my door and grabbed his head. Then I hit him with my signature punch, the right uppercut. Boom. Mitch went flying up in the air and came down like a rag doll on his head. That punch knocked Mitch Green out cold, and thankfully for him, a crowd of unsavoury characters formed to watch the action, which prevented Mike Tyson from doing any more damage. But the then heavyweight champ admitted, "I was scared. I really thought he was dead. I had crushed his eye socket, broken his nose, cracked some ribs, and one of his eye was closed for the season." Mitch admitted to getting a jack from the boot of his car and chased Tyson's car through the streets of Harlem, kicking and screaming. And it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me that this has got to be one of the craziest stories of not only Mitch Green's, but Mike Tyson's. I mean, Mike Tyson goes into so much detail about this story. Oh my goodness, like,
Wow.
You can visualize this happening. You can imagine it happening. For anybody that was there at the time who's seen it, must have taken them memories away and must still have their memories with them until the day they die, because that description right there alone really does put into context what the hell was going on. He was literally just knocking the shit out of Mitch Green, and Mitch Green was just continuing high as a kite to get up and carry on, and it must have been like, what the fuck? This guy just won't stay down, and Tyson literally had to put him down, like, to the point where he thought he might have killed the guy. It's crazy. It is one of the most infamous stories outside of the ring. Tyson, Mitch Green, Dapper Dan. It is one of these stories that gets so many different opinions on it. But wow, what a moment that was for Mitch Green and Mike Tyson.
Ah, it's Tyson Mitch Green too, isn't it? The street fight. Oh my goodness. It just every time, no matter how many times I've read the story, and there's so many different versions of it, they're pretty much roughly around the same. He seemed to be on the outside. I think the manager said that it was inside the store and he had his camera and he was taking pictures of what happened. It kills me. And you're talking about Mike Tyson, one of the most feared fighters outside the ring, let alone inside it. And there's Mitch Green. Balls are still taking him on with all of his entourage and just keeps getting up. What a story. Well, it was not even 5 a.m. when the police responded and found Mitch Green cut above the nose, which later required 5 stitches, a closed left eye, and he was hanging around with the crowd. He's hanging around the crowd saying, I'm like a politician in Harlem. Everybody knows me. He was a mess the following morning, even though Mitch sustained the worst of the injuries. They actually both ended up in hospital. Tyson had a hairline fracture on his right hand, no doubt, which he had to put a cast on it as a precaution. The fight with Frank Bruno was scheduled for early October, and that was off. News of the street fight was splashed across every single newspaper in the country, but obviously New York, everywhere. You'd see Mitch Green's face and closed eye in its full glory on all the front pages of many newspapers. And Tyson eventually actually issued a public statement not long after saying, I would fight Green anytime, anywhere, any place. I think he's already, that's a funny thing to say. I will teach him a lesson in the ring that he should have learned already. He's a punk and a true coward who tried to hide behind both the media and the police. If he means what he said to the media, let him drop those phony charges and be a man for a change, and let's settle this in the ring. Well, Mitch did begin the process of pressing charges against Mike Tyson for assault, and he filed a lawsuit demanding $25 million. Nice ransom there. But he later withdrew on August 26, 1988, after receiving a letter of agreement from Dodgy Don King that he got him. He was told if he gets himself in shape and he secures a top 10 ranking, he could fight Mike Tyson. King took to the stand actually in the lawsuit and was blatant as ever on how fighters come and go, and that if promoters, they're basically promoters always stick around. And he said, how much trouble is yesterday's fighter worth? What money is left to be made from Mitch Blood Green? He's a ghetto kid, you know. He's a ghetto kid. You have to know Mitch Green has always had something or another to say.
That's just typical of Don King, this, isn't it? Just like he gets to the point where he just wants to detach himself from people who he thought he could make some money off, and now he's just completely slandering him at the lawsuit by just saying, look at him, he's not worth anything anymore, he's just a ghetto kid, and he's just a guy who's a loudmouth and always had something to say. Well, Mitch Green's mother, Shelley, told a reporter that a friend of Tyson's and one of Mitch's former managers had put pressure on him to drop the charges. Mitch corresponded with his mother's claim, saying, "This man hit me and hurt me. I don't want him to get away with that." After Mitch finally dropped the charges, he came out of the police station and told a reporter, "Believe the hype. Mitch Green's got a title fight." Donald Trump renegotiated a new date for the Tyson-Bruno first fight with Mickey Duff, and this was at the time when Donald Trump was actually involved in boxing, and he was kind of like a bit of a money man, weren't he? At the time, he was kind of fronting a lot of these big events at the Trump Plaza back at that period of time, and Mike Tyson was obviously a regular feature there, and the pair met the following year in Las Vegas, Tyson and Bruno, which Tyson won by a 5th round stoppage. But if Tyson thought he had seen the last of Mitch Green, well, he was wrong. A few days after the street fight, He was on a date having lunch at a sidewalk cafe when he spotted Mitch Green on a push bike. And he couldn't believe it when, as he recalled, he caught my eye. Oh shit. He turned that bullshit bike around and went over to the hostess and asked, "Is that Mike Tyson over there?" "Yeah, that's Mike Tyson," she told Mitch. "Hey champ," she yelled to me and pointed at Mitch. She looked at me as if to say, "You handle this?" Mitch, with more front than the South End Pier, started on Mike once again, and he said, "You bitch faggot, you didn't kick my ass, you snuck one sucker punching." And Tyson recalled, "We were getting ready to go again when his date stopped him and he declared, 'I would have jumped up and carved that bitch up with my knife. But I hadn't, so I just let it go and turned away from Mitch. He got back on his bike, but word had spread and some of my friends in the neighbourhood followed his ass and shot at him to scare him away.'" Wow, another
God.
continuation of this Tyson Mitch Green saga. I never knew about this bit. I never knew they actually bumped into each other not so long after that incident, and it got to the point where some of Tyson's real seedy friends at the time were actually chasing him down on his bike and shooting at him to get rid of him. But I can't believe Mitch had the bollocks to actually go back for more.
He's mad. I'm telling you, obviously, the angel dust, PCP, whatever you want to call it, he's partial to the stuff, and it's messing with him. It's messing with his mind. I mean, the fact that it's still 1988. I mean, 1988, he robs that petrol station and then starts to work there, basically. Then he has this mad ruckus with Tyson, and then next thing he tries to go and see him again. Well, it don't stop there, because 1988 is a crazy year for Mitch Green, and it wasn't long before he was back in the news again, with many papers reporting on an incident on September 21st, 1988. Oh, but this time we're going to use the Indiana news, the South Bend Tribune. And this is what they said. They said boxer Mitch Green was arrested early today for disorderly conduct. Green was ranting and raving at the 125th Street and Park Avenue in Harlem around 1 a.m. when a woman complained to officers in a passing patrol car, said Sergeant Ed Burns. Emergency service unit officers subdued Green with a 50,000 volt electric stun gun and took him to the Metropolitan Hospital for evaluation. Now, Green, who was shirtless, something that you've got to become accustomed to with Green. He loves to take his shirt off. And he was shouting about Mike Tyson and Don King, of course. He was charged with disorderly conduct. They also went on to report that his outstanding warrants for driving with a suspended license. He shouldn't be in a car, but he's still driving around for an unspecified drug charge. The drug, we can pretty much tell you it was PCP or angel dust. 4 days later, Green, now 31, was arrested. Again, charged with third-degree assault this time after his girlfriend, Gadsden Balliers, who was 32, complained to police that Green had struck her, causing her pain in her chest and arm. Not good. When Mitch was arrested by police for the assault charge, he became violent at the police station, screaming about Mike Tyson and Don King, not letting him have that rematch, and they stole his money and blah, blah, blah. And his erratic behaviour led to Mitch actually being taken for a psychiatric evaluation. By this point, it was becoming a regular occurrence. So it was no surprise when the LA Times reported on October 3rd, 1988, that Mitch had drove the 1979 Lincoln, that pink Lincoln, into a parked car again. This is a complete separate incident. It's only the same one. This time it's in Queens. It's early Sunday. He's arrested for suspicion of drink driving. And it was his third arrest in 11 days. And according to police, Green was slurring his speech, had alcohol on his breath, and appeared lethargic. And when two housing authority officers spotted him standing beside his car in South Jamaica section of Queens, he had apparently lost control of the vehicle and crashed into a parked car. And I think this might have been the one. There's so many of these, but we actually crashed, just sat in the car where the car crashed and just lit up a loaded fag covered in PCP and just sat there waiting for the police to arrive.
Oh my goodness me! Like, I think it's quite evident at this point of his story that there's definitely a lot of elements of mental health involved here. It's quite obvious. He's making all these really, really poor choices, maybe under the influence of that PCP that we spoke
Definitely.
about. But my word, he's having a hell of a time at the moment. Now, Mitch being Mitch, of course, he refused to talk. call a lawyer, and submit a blood alcohol test while in police custody. One of the officers on duty said, "He's not saying a word. He began acting in a way that was going to hurt himself or others." When he was taken to central booking, the officers refused to take him, so they sent him to hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. He was then later taken to the Queen's Hospital, where the emergency room supervisor said he had no physical injuries. As things began to quieten down for Mitch, he decided it'd be a good idea to ask journalist Jimmy Breslin of the Gettysburg Times to attend his court hearing with him for the petrol station robbery and the assault that we've mentioned earlier. Breslin agreed to meet Mitch at his house on the morning of the trial, and this is what he wrote on October the 28th, 1988. Mitch Green stepped out the back door of his attached frame house in South Jamaica one day this week and looked at the 6 or 7 dented cars, none of which he is allowed to drive, parked in the large backyard. "How are we going there?" asked Mitch. The "there," of course, means to the courthouse. Why else would he be up at 8:30 in the morning? "By cab," replied Breslin. Now, Breslin continued with his story, saying that Mitch was carrying his white-framed sunglasses with a toothpick and looked splendid with his hair in modified dreadlocks, gold earrings, a navy blue double-breasted suit and blue shirt that was open at the collar to show the pounds of gold, including 4 sets of golden gloves. Now, Mitch was still showing the marks on his face from the Mike Tyson altercation, and as they waited for the cab to arrive, Mitch started to talk about the incident with Tyson, and he said, "While we were standing there arguing, I saw Mike Tyson twisting the ring around on his hand." Mitch then stopped with the story and told Breslin, "Put down that Mike Tyson is a sissy. Front page story. Go ahead and put it down. I call him Cecily Tyson. I call him that on my new rap record."
Holy shit. No, that's why we had to get a description in there from Breslin, because just from that description, he's dressed to the nines. He's rocking the Randy Watson look. He's got the soul glow going on, but he's dressed to the nines and he looks suave by the sounds of it, as Breslin sort of like to think. But the craziness how he will start a story and then he will just stop and then just completely switch to the other way. And Breslin, he explains it very well. He described Mitch as a likable, almost sweet guy underneath the surface, but he must have been high because, his thoughts were erratic in the cab as well, as the cab arrives. We're in the cab now. So he complained about some lawyer named Jacobs who hadn't called him back and immediately went in another direction. Mitch said the detective, Wassman or something. He lied. He said he arrested me on this case. He never arrested me at all. Breslin asked, "Who did arrest you?" Mitch responded, "Squad car." They arrived at Sutphin Boulevard Courthouse and Mitch explained to Breslin his version of events at the petrol station incident. And this is what Mitch said. We haven't obviously said what Mitch said, and this is it. He said, calling the attendant's description of what happened lies. He continued, "Here's what I do. I always went to the gas station. Nobody comes out to take care of me. So I get out and I put in my gas. Then I'll pay $5 or something and leave. They knew I was doing this all the time. My mother told me to stop it, but I thought I was just fooling around a little. What happened this time, I got on my Walkman. And when this little guy says he wants money, I go like this." Mitch shadow boxes. He shows what he did. He's a little bit of shadow boxing, basically, and he laughs. He got scared and run away. I go after him and say, "Hey, take your $5. He just kept running. Mitch shakes his head. "My mother told me not to do that." While waiting for his case to start, he continues to tell Breslin, "They had me in jail on this case 3 months until I got bail." No doubt it'd been Rikers Island. We'll get into that in a minute. Jail was all right. I was the grievance counsellor. A guy couldn't get a shower, they come to me. Somebody wants to make a long distance collect calls, he asked for me. I could go anywhere in the jail. I was running the jail. I'm bad. After demonstrating further shadow boxing of some sort, he stops to show Breslin the scar on his thumb. Larry Holmes' bodyguard bit me. Breslin then said his hands went back into speed action like he's shadow boxing again. Mitch Green made a noise in the rhythm of slapping his hands and then he began laughing again. I think from that description, You're getting the point that Angel Dust is not good for Mitch Green, and he's already probably not too well anyway. But brilliant stories.
What you're describing there is, I think, anybody who's ever been near any narcotics in their life, or anybody who's seen anybody and any type of narcotics in their life, that is exactly what being on either a trip is like or being on a high is like. That is a perfect description of it, because that is exactly what was going on there with Mitch Green. He was telling all these different stories, going off in different tangents, showing his shadow boxing. Yeah, man, it's just obvious that the drugs are really, really, really deep rooted in him now. That he's mental health, drugs, not a good combination. And obviously, I can't imagine what Breslin was like, sat in the cab with him going to this trial. And it's like, what the hell? I can imagine what he was thinking at the time. Now, when Mitch Green's case was finally called to the judge asked where his lawyer was and if his other offences were with him in Manhattan. Mitch said the arrest for driving while watching a television was lies. The TV was not on the dashboard, as explained, but actually on the floor of the front of the car, and therefore he had to bend down to see it. And that it wasn't like he was just driving along with the TV shows stuck smack in his face. Now, because Mitch didn't have a lawyer present, the hearing was rescheduled for a couple of weeks, but not before he made the judge laugh when he told the court, "I've got a rap record coming out in stores." Mitch was then dismissed. While in the corridor of the courthouse, a happy Mitch Green, he put on his sunglasses and he began to shadow box again. Showboating boxing, man. It's different than ring boxing. You catch the guy under the arm. He pretended he had an arm trapped and pulled another guy to him, and then you kiss him. He then continued to jail box his way out of the courtroom, and Breslin explains he was punching backwards. He spun on his heels, arms folded in front of him, and as he came spinning back to the front, he threw a full-arm backhand punch into the air. Ha! Mitch shouted proudly in the old courthouse. His audience? Well, that was a cop on the bench under the window, and the cop smiled at Mitch and said, "Regards from the 113. Now, on December the 30th, 1988, Mitch was arrested, again, at 8 minutes past 2 a.m. in Harlem, when yet again he crashed his pink 1979 Lincoln Continental into two parked cars. Now, when the police arrived on the scene, Mitch was drunk and disorderly, and in possession of a controlled substance, of course. This time, a cigarette laced with none other than PCP. Mitch is then taken to the police station, and the bail was set for $2,000 in cash.
Jesus Christ, he cannot drive. He's got that long, pink 1979 Lincoln Continental, and he can't drive the thing. I mean, they're long cars, you know. And the way he's dressed like a pimp. He's driving about in his Pimpmobile, and he's just smashing the fuck out of that car. and the fact that he smashes into cars and he don't give a shit. He doesn't even try and move the car. By the sounds of things, someone calls the police. It's Mitch again. Mitch just crashed his car, and he just sits in there waiting for him to arrive without his top, smoking a cigarette, covered in PCP, screaming about Mike Tyson and Don King. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. Oh wow. So after missing 2 court dates in January for the numerous other charges he had, he finally showed up for February 23rd, 1989 court date. He was wearing that blue double-breasted suit. Breslin said he was dressed to the nines. This time he's without a shirt. This time. Somehow the judge got to court without a shirt. Somehow the judge actually decided to let the geezer go. I mean, what the fuck is going on? As he walked out of court, he actually stood on the steps and informed the reporter what had happened. He said, "I just called a policeman a name. I didn't take a breathalyzer test. I don't drink." He then proceeded to take off his jacket and start flexing his muscles, while of course calling out Mike Cicely Tyson, as he liked to call Mike. I would never call him Sissy. Seriously. Wow. Just when you thought it could not get any worse for Mitch Green, he was stabbed in the thigh on May 3rd, 1989. Mitch tells police that he was stabbed by a person unknown to him and for an unknown reason. But then he tells the press a different version. He says, "I was carrying on with this girl. I knew she was married. She lied to me and told me they were split up. I came to her place one time and the dude was waiting for me. Motherfucker stuck me as Motherfucker stuck me as soon as I put my foot in the door. She was right there and she didn't warn me or nothing. On July 28, 1989, Mitch has an extensive interview with Tom McEwen of the Tampa Tribune. It's all about a new boxing gym that was opened by a guy called Rick Parker, and he actually wanted George Foreman and Mitch Green to become a part of that stable of fighters to train there. And Mitch is asked about his brushes with the law. He says, I don't do drugs, so I don't want nobody saying I'm stopping, and I don't drink. But if anybody thinks so, then I speak against drugs. You don't see nothing there about me being convicted, do you? Well, Tom replies, no, but here it says that you've been cited for 54 traffic violations. Are you that bad a driver? Yes, he is. But before answering the question, Mitch corrects Tom. He says, that's 56. Holy shit. This guy. Every time. He's just away with the fairies, honestly.
Well, Mitch continues to explain the reasons why he had so many traffic violations to him. And he said, it's like this. If a deputy stops me and gives me a ticket and I talk back, he gives me another one. I talk back and he gives me another. Talk again and I get another. Then I tear him up and I get another. How many is that? But I got myself a South Carolina license now. I can drive. Now, at this point, there's still no fight for him, but he continues to attend fights and make a public show of himself. And one of those nights was on February the 9th, 1991, when Sugar Ray Leonard fought Terry Norris. And it was our very own Steve Bunce from the UK that wrote in The Independent, and he said, I saw Mitch stand up on his ringside seat, whip his shirt off, and beat his chest. Now, Green was sitting next to John Gotti, the modern godfather, leading the applause for the fighter. Just imagine Mitch Green sitting next to John Gotti, the boss of the Gambino crime family, and decides to rip his shirt off and beat his chest, while Gotti's sat in the chair, applauding his companion for the evening. Incredible. You really, really just can't make this type of shit up. Now, it was during 1991 that Mitch met with a former fight fixer called Charles Farrell, and their friendship would develop over the years. Now, Charles recently wrote a long and in-depth article on Mitch Green for Deadspin as recent as 2018, and he explained how their paths crossed. Now, we will be using a bit of Charles Farrell's article as we go through the rest of Mitch Green's life from this point forward, because the newspaper articles on Mitch Green do start to dry up throughout the 90s. So at the start of his article/essay, he actually mentions that his piece contains a lot of conversations that took place many years ago, and that they're not word-for-word quotes, but in his words, they are pretty motherfucking close. Now, the phone answering machine messages are exactly what was spoken, so we've got to try and put this across to you guys listening, these messages between Charles Farrell and Mitch Green.
Yeah, and these accounts, I mean, with a lot of the account with the stuff we've already presented to you guys listening is Mitch Green in the newspapers, and these are and various articles. I mean, we used the online historical newspapers. We went through all of those throughout all the years, and we've got so many bits of information, and you get the gist of how Mitch sounds and how he speaks. I know we probably ain't doing the best of justice, Sean. We're not doing a bad job. If you go and check yourself on YouTube, you'll see what we're talking about when it comes to Mitch Green, and then I think Charles is the perfect guy to describe all this. So we begin with the NWA wrestler Lou Thesz, who in early 1990s was a freelancing talent scout and hiring agent for Antonio Inoki. Many may remember Inoki for his staged fight with Muhammad Ali on June 26, 1976. The awful thing. Well, Inoki had requested that Thesz find heavyweight boxers, preferably former world champions, who were willing to come to Japan and lose to him. Mitch Green, of course, was never a former world champion, but Lou Thesz agreed that he'd fit the bill as an opponent for Inoki. His height, distinctive look, and street credentials would make him the ideal opponent for Inoki. It was Charles Farrell who had Mitch Green's number, so he called him up and he pitched the idea to him. It didn't take long to convince him. Oh, baby, I would love to go to Japan. They're going to love me over there. But once Charles explained what was required of him in terms of him having to lose, he was less enthusiastic. Man, that's ridiculous. Mitch Green losing to a little Japanese man. Big Mitch Green. I ain't going to let that happen. I got my reputation. Besides, nobody would believe it. Mitch wasn't interested. But as Charles recalled, we kept talking. At one point, he decided that I knew enough about boxing, so I should manage him as a real boxer instead of a wrestler. In the fall of 1991, I flew Mitch up to Boston so we could meet formally, spend some time together and work out the details for signing a contract. My lawyer and I picked him up at Logan Airport, and we went directly to an elegant, if gimmicky, restaurant at the top of the Hyatt Regency in Cambridge. Now, when they arrived at the airport to collect Mitch, he said, "This is Charles." He looked ready to go running. He was attired in a bright orange jumpsuit with a gold zipper that went from throat to somewhere below his navel. That zipper would soon be put to use.
Now Mitch began his performance, standing up from his chair, and with no explanation, he addressed the diners and he said, "I want you all to feast your eyes on what a real heavyweight is supposed to look like." And as Mitch does, he took off his jacket and began an elaborate flexing routine that accompanies his monologue. Charles wrote, "Check out the pythons, muscles on muscles. If you're a heavyweight, this is what you should look like. Not like that midget. I want Mike Tyson. Michelle Cicely Tyson. He is a sissy. He is a homo. I don't like him. Oh, baby, wait till you see what I do with that boy if I get him in the ring. Mike Tyson's running from me. Don King, Don Queen is running from me." So here he is, flexed both biceps together and continued. And he said, "I'm telling you, Mike Tyson is a..." And he pumped the bicep. Ho! And he pumped the other bicep and he went, "Mo!" So in other words, he's calling Mike Tyson a homo. That was his derogatory term. He then kissed a bicep. And, you know, this is quite interesting. And this is a good moment to let you guys know that you can actually catch this performance from Mitch Green on YouTube. And it is part of the promo video for this episode. Oh my God. For season 2 and for this episode, if you've not already caught a glimpse of this, oh, it's comedy gold. Absolute comedy gold. Well, the restaurant at the time, they absolutely bloody loved it. And an applause broke out with the whoops of laughter coming from the kitchen. And this was the moment that Charles Farrell thought, blood has convinced me that he could be sold to the public. And just as Charles was ready to start the ball rolling for a return to the ring for Mitch, he gets shot behind the right heel and leg. The bullet passed through his foot and onto the sidewalk. Now, the altercation, which involved him getting shot, stemmed from an absolutely stupid dispute about beating Mike Tyson. So what happened is Mitch actually slapped some guy on a Harlem street, some random guy. So the guy retaliates by coming back at him with a handgun. And by Mitch's account, this is what happened, and he said, "Some ignorant brother was being a knucklehead, telling me all this nonsense about how I couldn't beat Mike Tyson. So I gave him a little slap, just a little tap on his face, and it knocks him down. The motherfucker gets up and runs away like a bitch and then comes back and shoots me in my leg when my back is turned." Jesus Christ. So he's now walking down the street and he's arguing with people about Mike Tyson and he's hitting them, and I suppose that was his own fault because he's hit the wrong person. This guy's then come back with a bleeding handgun and shot him. What the hell?
Oh my God. Honestly, just the flexing of the muscles is funny. And how it apparently had pins in his legs as well. It's a really bad one. And we'll go into. I mean, Charles actually wrote about what happened next. He said that Mitch limped 6 blocks as well to Harlem Hospital. Was actually X-rayed, told the bullet had passed through his leg, given a clean bill of health, and sent home. The attending doctor had actually missed the bullet lodged behind Green's knee. And by the time Mitch called me, as in Charles, a week later, he couldn't walk. His femur, further traumatized by running and jumping rope. He's still trying to exercise. It had split like a tree branch. I mean, it's in a terrible state. And Mitch's trainer had a perfect circular hole from where the bullet actually entered into his foot. So it's a perfect hole in his sneakers or his trainers. And he said after buying Mitch a new footwear, he gave me those sneakers to me as a memento. Here you go, Charles. Here's a memento for me getting shot in the leg. And he says that 27 years later, he actually still has them, believe it or not. So, yeah, funny. Mitch's injuries were serious enough for him to see the Celtics orthopedic surgeon, a guy called Frank Bunch, who speculated that his leg might have to be amputated if he waited just one more day to have this 8-hour operation. So Charles paid for the procedure, which saved his leg and it gave him a second chance to carry on fighting. Mitch actually said this of a shooting. Now, we haven't going to go because there's so many stories, but Mitch and Charles are actually in this restaurant, and it's like a restaurant. It's no meat. It's like a vegan restaurant. And Mitch is loving this restaurant. It's a great story. I mean, you can find this the Deadspin article, and I recommend you go and read it. But he's eating tofu, saying, this chicken tastes so nice. No, Mitch, it's tofu, mate. It's not chicken. And he just gets talking, and he starts. And this homeless guy comes into the place, asks, "Are you Mitch Green?" And then Mitch is like, "Yeah, can he come and sit with us?" He literally sitting there with this homeless guy in this nice restaurant. And Charles is like, "What the fuck is he doing?" And they're literally sharing each other all their war wounds. Like, he's saying, "I got shot here, I got stabbed there." It is crazy. I mean, it's a mad story. And it's from this where Mitch is telling this homeless man that I would have lost my leg. I went to Harlem Hospital, but they sent me home. Then it got infected and I couldn't put no weight on it. And it was a blessing that Charles, because he calls him Charles, not Charles, brought me to Boston and have Dr. Bunch. I call him Dr. Punch, saved my leg. Man, they had to put all these motherfucking pins in my leg. That's how I can't start coming back yet. So he's talking about his boxing. But for that to happen, Mitch needed to sort himself out. He needed to recover from his injury and get himself off the drugs. This would take a few months. So Charles used Mitch to assist him as a sort of bodyguard when dealing with some unsavory characters in Boston, I believe, because he owned a few properties. There's a mad story there, and he began to pitch some ideas to Mitch about a potential fight with a certain world champion around now at this point is Riddick Bowe. And the idea was to call some favors in and speak with his contacts within the business. And it was looking likely, very likely, that Mitch would fight Riddick or fight on a Riddick Bowe undercard.
Well, Mitch wasn't convinced about the idea of fighting on the undercard, taking his usual approach towards it. And he said, "Man, I was rated number 6 when I fought Tyson, and they stole that fight from me. Mike Tyson never beat me. Don King beat me." Charles just kept persevering, and he said, "Man, the past is the past. Let's think about your future. Let's get you rated and then get you a fight with Bowe." But Mitch wasn't budging, and he said, "Bowe ain't never done nothing. Who's he beat? Sanitation engineers? School bus drivers? Volunteer firemen? Substitute teachers? This is ridiculous." Charles just needed to keep Mitch out of trouble. And then maybe, just maybe, he could start reclaiming some of the money he was throwing at him. Well, that's when later in 1991, Charles got a call from one of his residents about a certain disturbance. They had called the police, and this is Charles's version of events, and he said, 2 cops had already arrived by the time I got to the house I owned in West Newton, where Mitch had long been living rent-free in the top-floor apartment. My own home was 2 miles away, in Newton Centre, but the Newton police station was only a dozen blocks from Mitch's place, so I didn't have time to handle the situation. Green had been screaming at his 2 girlfriends. Now, Mitch had actually flown his 2 girlfriends in from different parts of the country for what turned into a non-consensual threesome, and Charles continued to say things weren't going as well with them as he'd hoped. He was still screaming at them on the lawn while the cops were trying to calm him down. The women, still not fully dressed, looked shaken. My tenants were watching from their apartments, and the neighbours in the surrounding houses were watching from theirs. Mitch tried to get the cops to understand his outrage. "They said they were going to do it, goddammit. Why you think I fly them here? They're 2 pretty ladies. They told me they liked each other. You can't just stop right in the middle.
You can't stop right in the middle. That's absolutely brilliant.
Now, this information did not reach the press, so it would seem like the girls and Mitch were not actually arrested for anything. However, at the end of the year, Mitch was finally sentenced to go back to Rikers Island.
So Rikers Island, it's located in the East River between Queens and the Bronx, and is one of the largest correctional and mental institutions. And it has been described as New York's most well-known jail. Now, his sentence was to 6 months for obviously numerous drink driving offences. Now, you would think that this might be the perfect time for him to get off the drugs and calm himself down, but no. This is what Mitch Green tells Charles. Man, you got to see me there. All the inmates, all the gangs, all the guards. It's like, yo, it's Mitch Green. Oh, shit, it's Blurred. Big Mitch. Looking good, baby. Charles, I'm telling you, I'm the king of Rikers Island. Man, it's beautiful. Don't nobody bother me. I get to rest up, get lots of peace and quiet, and the food is good, man. 3 meals a day, all you can eat. The guards bring me extra, bring me desserts. I can lift weights and do push-ups. I get into good shape in prison, and I got this little cooler where I can keep all my Kool-Aid. I don't even know what to say. Oh my goodness. Mitch was finally released from his holiday resort in 1992, and he was interviewed not long after his release by the sports writer Michael Katz about Mike Tyson, who was now being sentenced to prison for rape. And Katz was asking Mitch, how do you think he's going to cope in prison? And this is Mitch Green's advice to Mike Tyson. He tries going general population. They're going to fail him up. They're going to beat him up, cut him up. Jail is like this. It's a man's home, and rape, molesting babies, robbing old ladies. You can't live with this. You can't live with us. We're going to beat you up. That's jail. He got to go preventative custody, PC. Got to. They don't like rapists. That's somebody's mother, somebody's daughter. That's a woman. He got to be in solitary confinement. Otherwise, there'll be 4, 5 guys got nothing to look forward to, got nothing to lose, be beating him up. You beat up a cop, that's okay. You sell drugs, you're making a living, but you don't want to go to jail for rape. And in PC, 3 years is like 6 years. You're by yourself. You don't get to go up to the yard. You don't get to go to school. You don't get to eat in the mess hall. Mix of all the inmates, play basketball. PC, Punk City. As much as I don't like him, I don't wish that on nobody. Wow.
Some wise words of advice there from someone who's clearly enjoyed his stay at Rikers Island on more than one occasion, as we've discussed through this episode. Well, Mitch continued, and he said, I'm the jailer. Jail is my second home. I go to jail. I go to population. If you want to try me, try me. Tyson, he goes to population. He gets fouled up. To prove his manhood, he's going to have to fight. He's going to be on suicide watch. Ain't that a bitch? He had the world in his hands, making money, having girls. You don't go out like that. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Then without fail, like a fly to a light, Mitch rounded off his summary of prison with the 1988 street fight, and he said to Michael Katz, hey, I didn't slap Mitch Green on the street and run away. I didn't beat up Robin Givens. I didn't beat up women. I didn't rob old ladies when I was young. Come on, man. Old women. All that crap caught up to him. Date rape? Ain't that a bitch? When asked if he felt sorry for Mike Tyson, this was his reply. He said, I feel so sorry. I'm going to eat some apple pie right now. I feel so sorry. I'm going to go outside and fool with the gals. Now, with Mitch out of prison, Charles began to make more inquiries about potential opponents for him. He actually called Larry Holmes, of all people, and he said, can I interest you in fighting Mitch Green? Holmes, of course, is shocked, and he said, Mitch Green? He's fighting again. Mitch Green is crazy. You putting any money into that guy? Charles replied by saying, yeah, I'm spending some money. So Larry gave him some words of advice, and he said, man, don't throw your money away on Mitch Green. Take it to Atlantic City and play the craps table. You'll have a better chance of making it back. Now, Larry Holmes wasn't the only person that kept telling Charles to cut his losses. The former light heavyweight contender turned boxing trainer, Eric Winbush, was another who struggled with Mitch, and he told Charles, "He says he'd like to work with me, but then goes off in a tantrum. I got a name, even on Def Comedy Jam. I'm going to fight Mike Tyson. Charles, I'm just going to say it. The boy's head is fucked up."
I think he's absolutely bang on. I believe that was an answer phone message as well. Wow. Al Braverman. Well, he was Don King's director of boxing, and he told Charles, "You'll never get that fucking guy in the ring. Believe me, we've tried. You know Don had him at one point. We got rid of him." In the end, there was a bet of $40,000 between Charles and between Al Braverman, whether Charles could actually get Mitch back into the ring again. And Braverman made his feelings clear. He said, "You're already losing all that money with Green. Now you want to lose more? What's fucking wrong with you, Charles? You know, I go around and I tell people about you. I say nice things about you to Don. Then you pull this kind of bullshit and you make me feel like a fucking arsehole." Well, Charles responded, "I'd get him to the ring." "You're a bona fide imbecile, Charles. You got no shot at winning," replied Braverman. Well, Mitch seemed like he might actually play ball this time, leaving a voicemail message saying, "Yo, Char, I need that fight, man. One of them fights, because I'm in shape." Now 35 years old, he was even spotted at Hector Camacho's training camp, where the Miami Herald reported that he was working out regularly. Even Don King, who was promoting Camacho at the time, was impressed. And from Don King's words, he said, "It's up to Mitch. If he wants to take the time to sacrifice, I think he can be as good as anybody out there. In the absence of Mike Tyson, there ain't nothing so remarkable out there." So fast forward to February 26, 1993, and Charles did what no one could do in 7 years. Good old Charles, when he got Mitch Green into the ring at the Total Sports Pavilion in Woodbridge, Virginia, against a guy called Bruce Johnson, with a record of 8 wins, 22 defeats, and 1 draw. Perfect fight. The fight was actually financed by Charles Farrell himself, but Eric Butcher actually got involved in some capacity. Couldn't quite work out if he was the promoter or he's working for the promoter. Pretty irrelevant. The fight, though, was nothing short of a disaster.
Now, Charles Farrell wrote the article on BoxRec about this fight, and this is what happened. And he said, in late February of 1993, he officially made his comeback, refusing to throw any punches at professional opponent Bruce Johnson. Mitch felt that he was being underpaid for the fight. Although he had picked up the tab for the entire card and voiced his protest by not fighting, the bout was stopped in the third after Green received repeated warnings by the referee that he needed to punch. Charles, of course, was fuming. He had wasted 18 months on Mitch Green and spent approximately $80,000 on him, and he said, "The $40,000 I got from Al Braverman for winning the bet was the only money I ever made managing Mitch Green." Now, the pair had a heated exchange in the dressing room which almost led to a fight, but they never came to blows and they went their separate ways. Well, for now anyway. Some time passed and Charles was contacted by one of Mitch's long-time girlfriends, Sandy. She left a voicemail asking him to call Mitch, and this is how the call went, according to Charles. "Charles, that you, man? You going to talk to me?" "Yeah, man, I'm going to talk to you, but you cost me a lot of money." "Oh, man, this ain't a money thing. It's a friendship thing. I keep telling you, I wasn't ready to get back in the ring. You were pushing me and pushing me. You didn't throw one fucking punch, man. You don't think I put you in with someone I knew you could beat?" "I know, man, I know, I fucked up. I was pissed off that you made me fight before I was ready. You fucked up too. I said I was wrong. You said you was wrong. Can't we just patch up this nonsense?" Now, I didn't remember having said I was wrong, but Mitch had a point. It was time to put this behind us. This is in the words of Charles still, of course. "Okay, let's patch it up. We had some good times together. I miss hanging out with you." And there was a silence on the other end of the line, and some time had passed. Oh, man. I'm sitting in the middle of the personal touch, crying my eyes out. These are interesting conversations, because you get to find out a little bit more in detail about the relationship these two guys had, and this is all based off what Charles Farrell had wrote about their time spent together. So it is a really good insight into the mindset, really, of where Mitch Green was at this point. He didn't want to take the fight. He was pushed back into it, or so he felt. But Charles had obviously put all this money into him. So there's kind of two sides to that story and two sides to the argument, really. So I kind of feel a little bit sorry for him for that particular moment, because if he wasn't ready for a fight, even though he said he was, I think maybe too long away from the ring had really become evident on that particular night.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, the reason why Charles is we pulled a lot of this sort of essay put together into this episode because the relationship he has, and he's probably the best person that explains it. A lot of the other stuff is from other accounts, and a lot of it's from newspapers. And you get the general factual information, but to actually get a feel of somebody, I think Charles brings that to light with Mitch Green. And well, Mitch and Charles began to go their separate ways as time passed, although they kept in touch while Mitch continued to fight. He actually fought for the vacant USA New York State heavyweight title, but lost by unanimous decision in 1994 against the undefeated Melvin Foster, who was 14-0 with one draw at the time. The following year, Mitch recorded his first victory since 1986 with a 6th-round stoppage against Lou Turchiarelli. That was when Charles Farrell came up with a master plan, he felt, that involved Mitch's past rival, of course, Mike Tyson, who was actually coming to the end of his prison term in 1995. And his first opponent after leaving prison was much of the discussion around boxing at the time. Everyone wants to know who's Tyson going to be fighting when he gets out of prison. And the bad blood between the two obviously still lingering in the air after the previous altercations in and outside the ring. And there was a possibility that Charles could actually sell this fight. And this is what he wrote. He said the crux of that pitch was that Al Braverman could get Green into the Indiana Youth Center where Tyson was serving his prison term. Get Green in to see Tyson, and the rest would take care of itself. Get Green in to see Tyson. See him about what? Asked Braverman. That's what all the papers will be asking when they go with Green to Indiana. What could this guy possibly say to Mike Tyson? Charles replied. And then this is the sort of the flow of this conversation. So this is Al Braverman. He says, okay, I'll buy it. What could that maniac possibly say to Mike? Charles says, he doesn't say anything. He just sucker punches him. One clean shot before they're separated. The moment he does that, Tyson Green becomes the only fight that people will want to see. You know what? It's not that crazy. I kind of like it. I can run it by Don. I'm not saying he's going to go for it, but let me make the call. Sit tight and I'll get back to you.
Now, when Charles pitched the idea to Mitch, he wasn't sold as easily as Braverman was, and Mitch said, it ain't going to happen, Charles. The boy's scared to death of me. He ain't never going to see me. He's a little homo, and I ain't got nothing to say to him. Charles replied, you don't have to say anything to him. Once you're in, just hit him. Mitch replies, you're crazy. Trust me, Charles. Nobody going to let me 50 feet from him. Don King don't want me near the boy. Charles says, leave that to Al. Mitch Green, how much do I get? Charles says, $1 million, something like that. Mitch replies, how much he get? Charles says, I don't know. Mitch then goes, well, more than me? Probably. How much? Asks Mitch. Mitch, what's the difference? You'll get $1 million. Hell no, I ain't doing nothing to build that boy's name up. You know, man, fuck him. It's your name we're concerned about. Just knock him out and everything turns around. Oh, he's a little sissy. He's a homo. Michelle Sissy Tyson. Well, so fight him then. You'll be able to tell the world, knock him out in the rematch. You'll make a fortune. I ain't doing nothing to promote him. And unfortunately, the pitch didn't work. Mitch wasn't interested. Charles went back to Al Braverman and told him that it was a non-starter. And Al Braverman responded, I'm just glad I didn't go to Don with this yet. I'd have been the one who looked like a fucking lunatic. And I'm not surprised. I mean, what a story. What a story if this would have happened. Like, if you remember at the time, Tyson coming out of prison was a huge thing. Imagine if Mitch Green would have gone into the prison and met him and maybe come along the lines of, I'm here to sort of bury the hatchet with you, and then he just clocks him one straight in the schnoz. And then there's a big sort of brawl ensues as a result. That would have made headlines around the world. And it would have built the fight. And it would have been an unbelievable comeback for Tyson. Yeah, obviously Tyson's comeback was still unbelievable in its own right because he come out of prison a completely different man. Imagine that fight with Mitch Green then. Imagine the difference between that first fight, the fight on the street, and then this fight, which essentially would be the third fight between them, inside or outside of the ring. That would have made a lot of money. But Mitch, being Mitch, cut his nose off to spite his face.
He did, and he should have rolled with it. I mean, by the sounds of it, I mean, I reckon Don King would have taken it, wouldn't he? Surely.
Of course he would.
Of course, it would have been. It would have made more money. It would have made more sense than what was it? Was it McNeely? He ended up fighting on his coming out party. I think it would have been a no-brainer, and the fact it would have sold, wouldn't it? I mean, it's a good idea. Tyson would have been like, "What the fuck? I'm going to kill him." It's really fascinating, isn't it? It's really fascinating that he came up with the idea and it just didn't happen. And considering that Mitch Green has only ever spoke about that homo sissy Tyson, blah blah blah, and he don't want to fight him. So it just shows you that all words that sort of coming out of Mitch, it's all the persona a lot of the time with Mitch. And so their time together had passed, and boy was it eventful. Years later, Charles looked back on his relationship with Mitch and he felt disappointed with himself. He even thought of reaching out to Mitch as quite closely back in 2018. And this is what he admitted. He said it would have been very difficult for Mitch Green or me to be friends once removed from the boxing business. That boxer manager paradigm is reciprocal but unequal, which is pretty right. Ultimately, it encourages a relationship that is both stupid and unfair. The manager is the adult, the father, so the fighter is relegated to being a child. The decades go by, but that model doesn't change. And I tell you what, it's a fascinating insight. And when we do these career profiles and we do these dark side of boxing, I think that is pretty accurate for me. Charles wrote about being a boxing manager in general and through personal experiences. And this is a very thoughtful and a truthful opinion on how fighters get exploited by their managers and promoters. And in boxing, paternalism is encouraged, often even on the part of the boxers themselves. At some level, most fighters know that relinquishing authority is going to cost them, but they do it in exchange for being allowed to focus on boxing, and occasionally as a means of exoneration from irresponsible behavior. The more successfully boxers can be relegated to the role of children, the easier it is to control everything that takes place around them. And wow, to hear Charles sort of echo them words, I think that sort of brings this to the point here we're getting to now where he's exploited him in his show.
Now, Charles does elaborate on how he actually exploited Mitch Green when signing a 22-page contract that handed him all the rights to his fighter beyond the ring. And this is what Charles said. He said Mitch was breezily offered the chance to have his own attorney present at the contract signing, being made to understand that he'd have to both find and pay for the lawyer himself. Since I came armed with a signing bonus that would be handed to him the moment his name was on the contract, Mitch chose to rely on the off-the-record advice of my lawyer, the person who was the treasurer of our two-man corporation. It seems morally and ethically wrong, doesn't it? The thing is, you talk yourself into believing that this shit is alright. You make up a story where, unlike every other manager, you're going to be equatable, even charitable with your fighter. Shortly after the contract has been signed and you have been paying the fighter a salary or footing all his bills, you convince yourself that the unilateral nature of the contract has a kind of moral justification, since the money to that point is only moving in one direction. In time, you stop trying to see the fighter's point of view. Your heart calcifies. Fighters often bitch that I'm the one taking the punches. Instead of thinking about that, your response is, that's what you get paid to do, motherfucker. But those punches have another life after boxing. They visit you again, years later. And this time, they don't go away. So I suppose to put that into context, what he's saying there, and which is something we spoke about in a lot of our episodes outside of the darker side of boxing, is how we feel like a lot of promoters, although they always say they have the interests of the fighters at heart, they don't, because they are only thinking about how this is going to benefit them. And it's the fighters that walk away from the sport with the effects of being in the ring all them fights, all them years, and the amount of fighters that we've seen either end up with CTE, whether end up with obviously Parkinson's, Muhammad Ali being the most prominent of those fighters, and there's many fighters that have sustained all these injuries and long-term effects of being in the ring. So it kind of feels like what Charles is doing now is he's actually admitting on behalf of many promoters in the world, some small and some very famous, that that's pretty much what a promoter and a manager's job is. I know there's many out there that will get into the sport that will definitely look after their fighters 100%, and there's many of them. But there are also many that are not like that and are only there for one reason and for one reason only, and that's for the money. So for him to write that up the way he's done and describe it the way he's described it, I think is quite an eye-opening moment in boxing for me, and probably something that doesn't really get spoken about, because it's like a poison chalice that you're not allowed to speak about, because if you speak about this then you're essentially slandering the promoters, the big promotional companies, and they don't want that. And to me, this is one of the most eye-opening comments and paragraphs that I've ever read out and that I've ever gone through, because it really sort of makes me realise that what we think about the sport, even though we're not in the sport in that capacity, is actually right. We're right in what we think about it and what our interpretation is of it, and he's just confirmed it. Charles Farrell has just confirmed that.
He has, and the other thing, I think the thing that he said that was the real opener for him is he's got sort of all this memorabilia throughout his career. Obviously, Mitch Green was a big part of that, and another fighter was Leon Spinks as well. He did actually, I think he tried to have them fight each other. He had both of them. He was managing them both at the same time. We all know from Leon how it worked for him. It pretty similar to Mitch's in a way, but obviously he was a better fighter. He went on to become a world champion, but he had a VHS video, and it's that VHS video that he watched. He didn't like what he see from himself. He wished he never watched it, but this is what all those sort of feelings came back, and he sort of looked at it now all these years later and thought, shit, I exploited him there, and I used him. And he put it on YouTube. It's on YouTube. You can watch the video, and this is the video describes. And I think it's because it's a funny story. The whole thing with Mitch is a fascinating. He fascinates me so much, and I know the drugs are a huge problem, and he's got some problems. And the shit he comes out with it is brilliant. Well, I mean, I've been in tears of laughter with this guy. But when you get to the depth of this, he was exploited, and I think we had to put this in for Charles, and because, as you say, it's a dark side of boxing, and it's another aspect to Mitch's career. He had been exploited, not just by Charles, he admitted it, but by others as well. And, well, just jumping back into this now, Mitch was actually scheduled to fight Shannon Briggs on December of 1995. How much of a great fight would that have been? Press conference between them two. But a week before the fight, he was arrested for smashing up his new manager's office, causing $9,000 in damage. The Tampa Tribune actually wrote that Green, now 38, apparently became enraged during a dispute with his manager, Seth Braunstein. No one was injured. The fighter was arrested and charged with second-degree criminal mischief, a felony that actually carries a maximum sentence of 7 years in prison, according to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Green was in custody pending his arraignment. A year later, in October 1997, a civil jury awarded Mitch Green $45,000 after the jury deliberated for a total of 6 hours over 2 days. The panel agreed that Green had provoked Mike Tyson in that 1988 street fight into a fight outside Dapper Dan's, but held Tyson financially liable for the injuries. Now, the Washington Post wrote that Green said he was upset after the verdict, but he was more subdued as he stood in the hallway surrounded by 4 court officials than he had been in court during much of that 2-week trial, which explains why the Bennington Banner sports pages actually said that Green's behaviour during the trial was occasionally disruptive. He would walk in and out and sort of shout and holler some stuff. Green said that there had been several offers by Tyson's side to settle for sums much larger than what the jury awarded. It's his own fault. It's a decade, you know what I mean? And he could have had that money. He could have had more money. He said, I thought the jury would have been in more my favour, and I should have got more money. The New York Daily News wrote that Green then darted to the courthouse stairs for a one-man victory dance and announced I whooped him, throwing phantom punches and flexing for the TV cameras. I finally beat Mike Tyson. I'm the people's champion. I proved it to the world. It's not the money the ex-boxer roared. I got money. It's that I can't get him to the ring. I beat him in court. It was actually later reported years, recently, a couple of years ago, that the sum that he actually received, that $45,000, it didn't actually cover his legal fees, and he was a man that walked away with absolutely nothing.
So after all that shit he had with Mike Tyson, after all them incidents, after all the provocation, after the beatdowns, after the PCP incidents, yet he ends up walking away with absolutely nothing more than wounded pride. So yep. It's just crazy, isn't it? It's so crazy, like how this all ended up. Like, for me, it doesn't. I don't believe how long it took. Like 10 years after the incident, before they actually ended up getting around to saying, "Here we go, we've made a decision on this one now, and actually, we decided that you provoked the fight in the first place, so you're not going to get cock or butt. Actually, you will get this amount for your injuries." And when Tyson had come out of prison in '95, and you look between 95 and 98, he was earning mega bucks at that time with the fights that he was involved in. If they would have took some money from Tyson's team, I bet that was about 3 times the money that he was awarded. So essentially, you probably would have walked away with something after his legal fees. But unfortunately, again, a decision was made and he didn't end up walking away with nothing. Well, after finally securing that court payout, he was back in trouble with the law in January of 1998, when the New York Associated Press printed this story. Mitch Blood Green, 41, was arrested Monday evening in the lobby of the Manhattan building by police officers who said they saw him throw a small bag of the hallucinogen angel dust, or PCP, to the floor as they approached him. Green was charged with misdemeanor drug possession and criminal trespass. The trespass charge stems from his alleged illegal activity while on city housing property. Police said Green told them, "I was following a girl into the building who I paid $10. Police did not say why Green had paid the girl. The case went to a criminal court, and the judge released Green and scheduled another court appearance for February 24th. Now, by the summer, Mitch made a return to the ring on July 25th, 1998, in Florida, taking a decision over Mike Dixon. But his victory was later ruled a no contest when he tested positive for marijuana. He then fought Puerto Rican Miguel Ortero 4 months later at the same venue, losing an 8-round decision, and then dropped a 10-round decision against Brian Nix in the October, missing the chance to become the New York State Heavyweight Champion. Late in his career, an aged Mitch Green actually held a minor world championship, the World Boxing Empire Super Heavyweight title, with a 12-round decision over Danny Wofford on March the 9th, 2002, the year before Mitch became a member for the Fighters Initiative for Support and Training, also known as FIST, an organisation that Jerry Cooney had founded to help retired boxers find jobs.
Just go back to that. You followed a girl into a building who he paid $10 for.
What was he up to there?
Police do not say why Green had paid the girl. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant. It's just he's paid this girl $10 for obviously a quick blowjob, and he's got a bag of angel dust, and then he sees the police, dashes the angel dust, and then he gets caught about to just get a blowjob. Oh, it's brilliant. On by trespassing. I mean, he's 41. Shit, he needs to sort it out, mate. Unreal. Well, does he sort it out? Well, a caseworker at FIST, who was a guy called Mike Smith, told the Hartford, Connecticut newspaper on June 27, 2005, Mitch has been exploring new options of work outside of boxing. He's been able to stay clean and out of jail. He's doing his best to function in the world outside boxing. He's completed his training to be a security guard, and we are in the process of helping him get his license in the field. In the meantime, he's been working part-time as a club security, but it's not steady work. While these seem like small steps, the fact that he's even interested and willing to try some new things is actually a big step for him. And you know what? That was good to hear. I mean, it sounds like he's trying to have it's like full circle, isn't it? He was working as a security guard as a young, hungry heavyweight, looking to go to the 1980 Olympics in Moscow, and then all of a sudden, all that shit happens. He misses out on the Olympics. He has that craziness that we've gone through here, and now he's training to become a security guard again. All these years later. Well, his time outside the ring didn't last long, because Mitch actually returned to the ring on the 2nd of August 2005 and won a 4-round knockout against a guy called Billy Mitchum. Mitch Green finally hung up his gloves after a 25-year boxing career with a record of 19 wins, 12 by knockout, 6 defeats and 1 draw. And that works out to be just over 1 fight a year. Wow.
Well, it's a very long career, but it's long because he was in and out of the ring all the time. Nobody normally fights for 25 years, so that's it. Yeah, never in it. He's too busy taking PCP and smashing up cars. That's what he's too busy doing during all this period of time. Well, I think we go into a more positive story now to come to the end of the episode. So we've gone from 1998 to 2002 to 2005, and now we go to 2014. There was a YouTube video uploaded 7 years ago, 2014, of a clean-cut looking Mitch Green, no longer with the so-glow locks, actually saying that he's now a devout Christian, is married, and is a marriage counsellor through his church. And there is also a Sky Sports article from 2020 about a guy who was a fan who actually reached out to Mitch, and he became friends with him, and said that he lives in a duplex in Jamaica, Queens, in New York, and his mum lives next door, and I believe that his brother Jerry is in the area too. I think he has a girlfriend because when I've called, she has answered. Mitch does have people around him. He is the king in his environment. He used to be a big dude, a feared guy. Now, well, he's 63 years old. His softer side has come out. Mitch is a good guy, and this is what the gentleman who was interviewed for the Sky Sports article in 2020, in last year. Now, there is a Facebook page that looks like it's probably a fan-made Facebook page, and you can find that page. It's at Mitch Blood Green. Now, there have been rumours as well of the New York-based filmmakers Mike Martinez, Tyler Ray, and Max Henderson about starting the process of making a documentary about Mitch Green. I think that's something, after doing this episode, I think we hope that actually develops, because imagine Mitch Green's story visualised. Imagine his story visualised and portrayed by well-known actors, or maybe just a documentary that is based on a lot of the stock footage that's available, or maybe it's a documentary based on his life now. By all accounts, by everything that we were able to source for this episode, it seems like he's actually turned his life completely around, and he's no longer crashing into cars in a pink Continental. He's doing the right things in life. He's a devout Christian. It sounds like he's found God, and God's turned his life around. It seems like all these crazy stories and all these laughs that we've had at the expense of some of the incidents he's been involved in have actually changed. And whilst, again, we say it's the darker side of boxing, well, a lot of what he's done is the darker side of boxing. But to hear these reports about where he's at now is quite encouraging. And I'm quite happy because, as much as we get to laugh at some of these incidents and it makes us, gasp at belief that these are happening, it's not nice when these things do happen to people and you can kind of see someone's life spiraling out of control at the time. It's nice that it sounds like his life has changed for the better and that he actually probably has a normal life now, and that PCP is a thing of the past. Genuinely, Johnston, I would love to hear from Mitch. I would love to hear from him, or I would love to hear from somebody who knows him or somebody that can put us in touch with him. I would genuinely love to sit down and interview him, and I'd love to get him on a call with us to have as an addendum to this episode, because whilst this episode it's been fun for us, it's been a laugh for us because there's some absolutely outrageous incidents, but to see that he's turned it around, I would love to see what his thoughts are on all this, and in retrospect and in hindsight how he feels about all this, because I can imagine if he's changed his life, he'll be able to speak about this from a completely different perspective and give us some different stories. So I tell you, This has been one of the most enjoyable episodes of the darker side of boxing, because there's been some great incidents that we've laughed at, but it's been enjoyable in the sense that we kind of feel like there is a lot going on from a good side of things for Mitch now. And whilst we've been laughing to ourselves all the way through this episode, it's been a pleasure to sit down and really bring to light a lot of these stories about Mitch Green, a lot about some of the crazy moments during the course of his life. But I've been happy that we've been able to bring to you at the end of it a bit more of a happier tale to end this episode.
Yeah, and I agree. The fact is, he's always been a fascinating character for me. It just the way he carries himself, the way he speaks, from all them videos from back in the day, it's almost like I'm not watching Mitch Blood Green. It feels like he's not a real character to me in my head. I can't quite get that, like from the beginning when we were talking about from where his background was, New York City in the South Bronx, or whether he's in Harlem, that shit Warriors was real. Like that, so many people say you could go online and you could look at the photos of the environment that he lived in, all the trains. It looked like a war zone, and it had all those gangs, and there was that real peace treaty thing, and Mitch was involved in all that. So he was the way he turned out was he become what he lived in. He become that. It was the circumstance of his environment. That's what he became, and he couldn't get rid of that. And the fact that he had the pandemic, and that is a big part of it. He was in that environment. He knocked about with those type of unsavory characters. Although he was a boxer and he was trying to get himself out of it, he had that pullback, and I think the drugs clearly affected him. And Angel Dust was bad for Mitch Green. Angel Dust and driving big pink Continental cars did not suit him. But the stories are fascinating. I mean, come on, they're absolutely hilarious. I mean, we don't know precisely how everything went word for word, but you get the gist of it. You look at some of his quotes, absolutely amazing. He loved Rikers Island, like holy shit. It's just an incredible story. But for me, it just doesn't feel like he's a real person. It would be great if he could listen to this and we could get an interview with Mitch Blood Green. I'd love that. I mean, you never know, it might do. I've heard as well from that guy who spoke to Sky Sports that he's open to talking about anything. He was saying I asked him anything. So if that guy hears this, someone could track him down, or maybe we can, and send him an email and say, look, because he literally said, I phoned this number. So he said to him, is this Mitch Green? And he went, yeah. And that's it. They hit it off from there. So, well, you never know. I would love to talk to you, because the stories are endless. There's a lot more that hasn't come about, but wow. I mean, what a great darker side of boxing that was. It was one I've always been waiting to do, Sean, and I'm really pleased we've done it. I hope we've done it justice without absolutely making it like he's a wanker or anything. It wasn't that. It's just some of the stuff that he says. We're laughing at him. Yeah, we are. We're laughing at the things that he does as well, but he doesn't help himself when he's on drugs. By the sounds of it, when he wasn't on drugs, he was a very quite nice guy to be around. And I think it's just because of the public. As soon as the cameras are around and we're only getting newspaper clippings here, they're going to perceive him in a certain way. End of that, I think he thrived. I think he quite enjoyed it. But by all accounts, he seems like a genuinely nice guy. Apart from the incident with the hitting the woman, I'm not quite sure about that and whether that was true or not. But that's the one thing that probably I'd say. But it was early, who knows? He was dry, he was drugged up. But what a story, Sean. How fun was that, mate? Unreal.
It was very fun. I mean, never clean Mitch Green. That's kind of like the ringer to it. That's kind of the theme to Mitch Green's life, really. Going the product of his environment, as you rightly pointed out earlier. He's never clean because he's always on PCP constantly. I don't know how he managed to get through his boxing career without failing drugs tests. If he was on PCP quite a lot, I'd be interested to hear from himself, like how did he manage that? How did he manage to get through that? Or are some of these reports exaggerated? Very interesting, very, very interesting. But yeah, never clean Mitch Green. What an absolute tale! What a story! Mitch has provided us with some absolute comical moments, some of the most funniest moments that I think I've ever sat down to record. Some of the stories, the petrol station story in particular, was one that absolutely that's got the pair of us creasing. And I've really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you guys listening, I hope you've enjoyed this one. I really do, because this is a story that might not be familiar to many of you, but some of you might know about Mitch Green and that infamous moment with Tyson, of course. But if now you've had the chance to listen, you'll have heard all these other stories that made Mitch the figment of many people's imaginations as to what he was really like. And I hope you guys have enjoyed listening. please do go and let us know on social media your thoughts on the episode. Share it on social media. You can do that by following us on Twitter at darker_side_pod, on Facebook, the BTR Boxing Podcast Network Facebook page, the Instagram page, the YouTube channel's available to subscribe to on there as well. Please do go and check that out. There will be, of course, the after show, the darker side of the after show with Lukey at Lukey Boxing. He'll be dissecting the episode from his perspective, and we'll be talking about
it'd be great to hear what he says. I'm interested to see what Luke says. Shout out to Luke, by the way. Loving the stuff we're doing with him, Sean.
It's going to be great to delve into it from someone else's perspective. And guys, please do go and let us know. Let us know what you think about the episode. Let us know what you're feeling about the season so far. We've had many good comments talking about how they've really enjoyed it. It's just getting better and better. Please make sure you're sharing this and tagging us in and tweeting it out, because it really does make a difference when you do get it out there to all your followers on your social media channels. More people get to hear it. More people get to see what we're up to, what we're doing, and get to enjoy the fruits of what we put together for you. And I'm telling you, we've had a ball putting this one together. Please make sure you go and subscribe and rate us on Apple Podcast also, or wherever you get your podcast. It'll be a great help for us if you can do that. We really hope you've enjoyed this episode. Episode number 5, season 2, Never Clean, Mitch Green.